Well, hopefully you are in the right location. My name is Pam Glick. I am the Director of Engagement for Mindset Consulting. And I'm here with Don Knutson today from Entegris, and we want to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing for the past several months on one of our projects. So Don, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Don Knutson. I'm the CIO at Entegris. Been at Entegris for a short 22 years. I've been the CIO almost 11. So been working with Mindset for several years now.
Yeah. So we're going to tell you a little bit about our project, and we would love questions as we go to kind of want to make it interactive. But at first, a little bit about Entegris, Don.
Yeah, so Entegris was founded back in 1966, and for those that are old-time Minnesota people, it was actually founded in Chaska. It was named Floraware. Later went public as Entegris in 2000. And since 2004-05, headquarters moved to Billerica, Massachusetts after one of our major mergers. And revenue-wise, we're almost a $4 billion company. When I started, we were under 300 million. I think we had 3 locations now, just under 4 billion with probably close to 80 locations, and a very heavy presence in Asia with about 75% of our revenue coming from the Asia-Pac region. It's one of the things that, if you look at our company, we're within the semiconductor industry. We don't make any semiconductors, but no semiconductors can get manufactured without us, and we really, for those that know anything about the semiconductor manufacture process, it's all about purity and reducing the yield. And our customers are the Samsung, Intels, TSMCs of the world, and our job is to help their yield. And our growth has been really taking off in recent years. If you think about our annual revenue was 1.6 billion in 2019, and going to 4 billion at the end of 2020. So if you think about that's all COVID years in which we've grown that much, and half of that growth has been organic, and half of it has been through a major acquisition, which was with CMC Materials, which really leads to why we're sitting on stage together.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that has not changed as we've grown is our PACE values. It is really core. I know a lot of companies, every company has a value statement. PACE values is something that is absolutely core. As we grow, it is really critical on how we manage all of our relationships. It's not just internal, it's with our vendors, it's with our customers, it's with whomever we react with and interact with. And it's based off of teamwork. I think you will see that at the end of this presentation, that we live teamwork and a focus on our people. We do demand excellence. That was something that you will also see, that I like to think that our pace is very fast. I know that my enterprise architect, who was here earlier, actually said that we're like a $4 billion startup company because we can move that quick. And that really drives into the creativity and innovation. We're not afraid to take on a lot of risk and a lot of projects. And ultimately, making sure that accountability. I always look at the PACE values, and a lot of times when you start talking with employees about values, employees can think about, oh great, you're a value-based company, but it's not just for the employees. There's an accountability, there's a drive for excellence. It's accountability to our investors, accountability to our customers, as well as our employees. We'll go to the next slide. So the reason why we're here is really around the fact that our Entegris ERP project working agreement with heavily with Mindset. So we acquired CMC Materials, which was a $1.2 billion annual revenue company, with over 700 million of that in their pads and slurries business, which was all on Oracle. And the goal was, within 12 months, take that from close, take that and put it onto our our core SAP ECC instance. You know, the reason why we're doing that, you know, and the driving factors is that we need to make sure that we hit our synergy numbers. It's really important. I always say there's two core reasons why we're really pushing for speed. One is synergy numbers, and that's why you acquire companies, is making sure that you can operate, do more with less, and as well as the other factor is that there's a strong belief in our company that if you get everyone on the same system, you start acting as one company, and you start acting as, you're not really truly integrated as a company until you're integrated with your processes and your systems. And we actually saw that when we acquired CMC Materials. They had approximately 10 different ERP systems. Now, a big part of it was on Oracle, but they were very dispersed on multiple different other environments. And that includes even their networking, their cybersecurity, and their processes. And so our overall goal is to integrate that very quickly all into our single core so that we can start operating as one company. Kind of went off script there, but I think we hit most of those things, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, a couple of other things that'll lead into the next slide. You know, some of the guiding principles when Entegris came to Mindset to kind of start talking about how we could plan for this, or how can Mindset really help us here. The speed was a big thing. The pace that we had to deliver the project was a very big thing for Entegris, for some of the reasons that Don had mentioned. And then the partnership that they wanted to build, and the participation Entegris wanted to have in the project. So what we want to tell you today is kind of some of the insights that we want to share with you around how we're doing this conversion, what's unique about it, you know, why Entegris didn't go with just another Accenture, Deloitte, big SI that can come in with their, you know, 100-person team and their methodology. So what's unique about what we're doing? Because, I mean, the project in and of itself, it's an SAP conversion, right? Yep. From a heritage legacy system onto an SAP system. But we're trying to do things differently, trying to think differently, and trying to end up in a better place than some of the horror stories you might have heard about SAP conversions. So one of the first things we did when Entegris came to us and said, you know, we have this project and we'd like your help, was talk about how are we going to structure a project team that can deliver at this pace. And we said we absolutely have to have kind of three different things. We need Entegris IT, so we need the expert and ownership from the Entegris IT team, specifically with their SAP, BW backgrounds, the key systems that we were working with. We need the Entegris business experts. So Entegris has a business support team that actually sits in the business, and they support their SAP processes. So these are the people that know their processes in and out. They know how the 80+ locations that Don was talking about use SAP and what's best practice at Entegris. And then on top of that, we knew that we needed to bring in additional staffing. So this is a lot of work that we're going to do over the course of a year. We need just additional hands, SAP experts. So they were looking to Mindset and some other third-party teams. So that's how we kind of built a purpose-designed project team. The other thing that I'll add is, like typical SAP conversions, we've got the normal work streams or the functional streams that you guys are used to. We've got 4 components to that to make sure that the entire team is well represented. So Entegris Business, I was telling you about those business process experts that are part of the team. They really ensure that the processes are being adhered to that Entegris wants to roll out. We have the heritage business representation. So the CMC Materials folks that are going through this transition. We have approximately 12 people that are fully dedicated to our project from their heritage systems that can help us translate some of those processes over into, you know, from what they do on Oracle onto SAP. We have the Entegris IT team that is fully dedicated to make sure that whatever solution we're working from fits. And then we have consulting SAP experts from Mindset that are really supporting the team and bring the SAP knowledge. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about how we're taking this from a methodology. So the other thing we did was, we didn't come in and say, Don and Entegris, this is the methodology we're going to take. We actually spent a week in Chaska. I spent with their directors and their SAP team talking through what is going to be the methodology and approach that we want to take to do this. And we're taking pieces from Activate, previous projects, some projects that we've done with Entegris in the past. And we're going through your typical cycles. So starting with the current state and fit gap, right? So mapping through what are those existing Oracle plants' current state processes and defining what is in scope. So are we going to keep third-party integrations, or are we not? Are we going to move them to Entegris standard or not? So some of those discussions were identified right up front. And then we went through a fit gap of what are some of the process gaps that we have against the Entegris standard SAP solution. Because I think a lot of times, consulting companies can come in and say, well, this is your fit gap to standard SAP, but what we did was actually, it's a fit gap to Entegris's SAP, because most of you can implement SAP 15 different ways, right? It's not all going to be the same SAP from one company to another. Then we went into solution validation, and this is the piece where we ensured we went back to our super users, back to our stakeholders, and we showed them the solution. First through just process flows, making sure that, hey, does this make sense from a process-wise? And then we actually went into the system and demoed it for them. We used their data, and we walked through, this is how your day in the life is going to work. Tell us what's not working. Keeping in mind kind of our framework of saying as much Entegris standard SAP as possible. We want to do very little customization because of the speed that we needed to go at. So then we get into build, and that's where we're taking a little bit more of an iterative approach. I can't say that it's full agile, but we're going through building, testing, and validating all within kind of an iterative approach. So those business users aren't waiting till the last minute to see all of the integrations or the developments that we're doing, and then deploy and support. So I'd call it that hybrid phased agile or agile fall that Sam was referencing, that we chose to do for methodology. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think it's really important that, where Pam was talking about the Entegris global template, we made it very clear that's what we're going to put in order to hit an aggressive time frame with as many locations as we're doing it. It's a global implementation, that we can't spend time doing process improvements. And every one of us that have done an SAP implementation or any type of ERP, when you start doing conversions, you'll start hearing from the people that are doing the conversion what they've always wanted to do, their wish list. And I always sit there and say, when you really dig down, you find out that's not what they're doing, that's what they want to be doing, because they're trying to use this as an opportunity. And the reality is in order to do it, we are going to drop our global template on top, and unless, and there's always exceptions, but very few exceptions, we are going to stay to that standard, and it's going to be very critical. I think the other challenge with CMC was also the interfaces to their manufacturing and their quality systems, and I think we actually get into that. But it's really, they have some critical business functions utilizing their manufacturing and their quality systems, and we made a decision that we don't have the bandwidth or the time to rip out those systems and put in the Entegris standard, so we're going to rebuild the interfaces back to SAP. So that ended up being a very critical portion of this implementation.
Yep. So I did just want to walk through the timeline just to give you an idea of how much we're doing within the period of a year. So there's a total of 9 manufacturing plants, and how much revenue? I forgot.
Over about $750 million.
Okay. Over the course of a year, from preparation through the last hypercare support, we're going to do this over the course of a year. 9 of these plants, and these plants are spread across the US and Asia from a scope perspective. And the other piece to add to let you know is when we go into a plant, we take the entire plant on SAP. So it's not pieces of a process, it's everything from your planning and forecasting all the way through to your finance pieces. That includes all of your procurement, your sales, your manufacturing, your quality, all of your shipping and logistics, inventory, all the way through to finance. Everything goes on SAP. That's Entegris's strategy. So just to give you an idea, we broke it down into 3 different releases. When we were strategizing, how would we go about releasing this? Which plants should go first? Which ones can we group together? We grouped them by product, basically, and location. The US pads, that's a product from the CMC materials, and those were all based in US, so those were the first 3 to go. And then we're doing some lessons learned, so those went live in February and March. We're taking, what did we learn from those, and applying it to the slurries portion, which is the larger revenue plants, and those are 2 in the US and then 4 in Asia. So that gives you an idea of kind of the timeline, high level, how we're deploying that. And then I think one of the questions that we wanted to answer here is, why did Entegris really want to approach it this way versus why wouldn't you just go to an SI, a big SI, or your Deloitte or your Accenture and have them just do it for you?
Yeah, so there's multiple reasons. It starts off with is that the internal SAP team at Entegris is very strong. We've done multiple implementations and integrations over the 20 years that I've been there, and several of the key leaders have been there for much of that time. And so we have the capabilities, we know our business processes, but the reality is we just don't have the pure bandwidth to be able to do this scale. So how do we take what we've done and actually scale it? And the reality is with Mindset, we've done other implementations. We've actually done implementations of some of our smaller acquisitions where we've handed it completely over to Mindset to actually do the implementation during the COVID and doing it, most of it remote. And so there was a familiarity there, but additionally, it was that Mindset was not afraid of the 12 months. When it comes right down to it, we've talked, the Heritage CMC IT team, their leadership team was like, well, there's no way. This is way too aggressive. And that's initially what we heard. When we went to some of the other big players, they said the same things, like, you're nuts. And the business teams actually also thought we were nuts. But Mindset, after the meetings with our team and Mindset leadership, said, yeah, we think we can make this work. And this is how, and Pam talks about the workshops that we had. So the reality was having the courage to say, hey, we can make this work, and we can make it work within this blended team that Pam talked about, in which, hey, we're going to work together, and there isn't going to be a lot of the times, and we brought in bigger SI implementators, and they will have their template. And that works if you're going to give them the keys, but in order to say, hey, we're going to follow our template, we need your resources to come, it just makes it a lot harder, and it's a lot more painful. And as we know, you end up paying for those large SIs. Mm-hmm. So.
You want to go with this one? You want me to take this one?
Yeah, you can start on this one.
All right. So we wanted to kind of circle back and say what made Mindset and Entegris really great partners, and Don kind of talked about it a little bit. And I think one thing I want to call out is just the PACE values that Entegris has as an organization and Mindset's values really do kind of line up. When we talk about things like trust, for example, one of the things that we have on the project is really open trust, I would say. I have a lot of people that will come to me and just say, I don't think this is going right. I don't think we're doing this right. How can we do it differently? And we have the conversation to adjust. We also kind of have the transparency with leadership and all the way up to Don's engagement. I can call him up and say, this is a risk. I need help here. I need some Entegris people, or I need to bring in another consultant to help here. So there's a lot of open transparency conversations that, in my experience, maybe didn't always happen with larger other consulting companies. And then just the experience, Don touched on it, he's worked with Mindset in the past on these sorts of projects, so there's just some history there, and Mindset has the experienced consultants that can come in and do this. Collaboration, I talked a lot about the planning that we did up front. So we spent a lot of time just thinking about what's the right approach, what's the right team. One thing that is unique, I would say, is Entegris brought an IT team, and they said, I have a functional lead that does logistics, and I have a functional lead that does finance, and they're gonna be 100% dedicated to this project. Mindset, where can you fill in? They brought more people, those are just examples, but they said, okay, I need Mindset to fill in these specific skill sets, and that's kind of how we built the team that's working together. Focus, so having consultants, that's the sole focus that we're there at Entegris for, is for this project, so that's really beneficial. And then allowing the Entegris teams that have been dedicated to the project to try and carve out, this is the only thing you're working on, this is the number one priority for Entegris, which number one, Brandon, right? Number 5, number 10, whatever. And then culture fit in one team. So we do really operate as one team. There isn't a Mindset, Entegris, CMC. We try and operate as one team when we're working through this. And we solve problems together, we raise problems together. And I think those would probably be the reasons that made us kind of the best partners. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing is what you just talked about is everyone on the project team acting as one. You don't see or feel that here's the consultants, here's the business BAs, and here's the IT team. When I've gone on, during a go live and gone on site, you can't even, in fact, in some cases, I'm not even sure who's the consultant or who's from the business team, because we've grown so quickly. I've not had a chance to meet everyone and all 10,000 people in our company, with 6,000 of them actually be new over the last 3 years. So we've had a lot of turnover and a lot of new people and growth. And in this project team, when I've gone on site, the teams just work together. You're not sure who belongs to who, where the paycheck's coming from, but the team is working as one. And I think also that the culture of people to be able to raise concerns, I think is true. We know there's a lot of pressure and that there's deadlines that we're trying to meet, but at the same time, we want to make sure that it's transparent. We have a culture where when we rank our projects, red, yellow, or green, if it's green, make sure it's really green. If it's yellow, we want to know about that. And red, we absolutely state it's red and then say what you need from sponsors to help you. It's all about helping the project, not showing that, hey, everything's perfect. With that, in fact, that'll actually get you in more trouble than not. So, and just a prime example of right after this meeting, we have an update with our ELT and on the project status, and Pam sits in that meeting and will be presenting as part of the ELT on the overall integration. So it's just an example where we treat all of our partners as one and as an extension of our company.
Yep. So what's working well of everything that we kind of talked about? The accountability and transparency at all levels of the team, like I was talking about. So, from the developers all the way up through the executive team, we have the support and we have the ability to kind of raise things when we have concerns and or celebrate the wins when we have a success there too. The high level of engagement and support from leadership, again referencing what Don kind of talked about, all the way to the CEO, he has a vested interest and he asks probably every month, how is it going, and where can I help and what's at risk. Very, very, very supportive at all kind of levels of the leadership. And I do want to highlight, like, Entegris is doing a ton of projects right now. And so while I say that this is the number one, there's a whole integration office that's managing, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 other projects just to do with this whole CMC integration. So for us as the ERP team to have that engagement from leadership is I think, a really strong point for us, and very supportive. And then the hands-on and in-person. So Don and I were talking about this just before. These last 2 points are kind of a double-edged sword, because I think they're working well, but they've also been some of our biggest challenges. So one thing that we've done with this is we have challenged our teams to go back to typical traveling. So, prior to the pandemic, it was a Monday through Thursday for a lot of consultants when you were doing projects like this, right? Fly in on Monday, fly out on Thursday. We're actually doing a lot of that with much of the team, including the Entegris team. They're traveling along with us. Being hands-on insight in those plants, seeing how the processes work today, seeing how it transitions. It's very beneficial to do what we're trying to do at the speed, but it is also one of our challenges that we'll talk about on the next slide. And then speed over perfection driver. So one of the, I guess, mantras that we have on this project is the speed over perfection. So trying to not make sure that a release is perfect. And I think Sam or someone in a previous presentation kind of talked about, like, the release doesn't need to be perfect. Think MVP. Think, what do you need to do to keep this plant running? Because there's a lot of benefits of just getting them on SAP, getting their data starting to go through SAP, and you can always optimize later. So speed over perfection helps us really make some of the decisions when we're thinking about, well, this is going to take us 10 days and somebody uses this for only 2 hours a month. We're going through some decisions like that. So anything else you want to add?
I mean, it does help make a decision. I mean, ultimately, everybody wants to improve the process, and they're like, why wouldn't you take the time? The business people want to make things better. I mean, that's how they're wired. And the speed over perfection, once you can get them there, there's a change management element to get their minds around that. But once you can get them there, it helps make the decisions so that you can move forward. And really, the number 3 point, being in person is critical because it's based off one thing. It's called relationships. We all know relationships is more important than any technology. And it allows the project team to develop relationships with the leaderships, teams within the plants, as well as all the people that are going to be using SAP. And one of the things that I've received feedback on the positive is because those teams are there, they know that we care. We know that we're not doing this to them, but we're doing it with them. And I think that's really critical.
Yeah, it's not just a transaction.
Yes.
They're not just a transaction. So a couple lessons learned. It's never too late to bring in super users. So one of the things that we had a challenge at with one of the plants that we just went live with, their super users didn't have time for this SAP project. But wait, it's the number one priority in the company. But we slowly brought those super users in. It was late in the game. We were just finishing UAT, but we continued to work and build the relationship at this specific plant so that we could bring in super users. And it just took a while, but it's never too late. Even if you're done with UAT, I think bringing in super users, paying attention, and having that specific relationship is invaluable to this type of a project if you want to move at that pace. And I'm assuming everybody's familiar with what a super user is, but we brought them in from the plants to really participate in the solution validation pieces, doing the testing, helping to build our training material, training their counterparts, and then being kind of the first line of defense for support at Go Live. And then the other lesson learned is process governance. So we talked about taking that Entegris footprint, going into a plant, deploying them on SAP. If you don't really watch that process governance of, okay, what is in scope for what we need to deploy? What do we absolutely, at a minimum, need to deploy here? If you don't have that process governance, it's going to get out of control, and you'll end up moving your date. So that was one thing. Okay. That's one thing that lessons learned I probably would have said we need to be a little bit more stringent on upfront.
Yeah, and then a couple of the other areas, if you looked at the timeline, we talked about that there's 4 major go lives, so we're doing rolling go lives. And typically when you do an integration, you have a go live, and then you've got hypercare support that always has a tail that never quite ends. And so, because the plants just don't want that hypercare to go away, which is okay, because you slowly get to a small percentage of your core resources working on that. But with a rollout, we need those resources to roll off very quickly and go to the next go live. And in order to do that, really managing what does that post-go live support look like. And after our first go live, the hypercare support was more intense than what we needed, or what we thought we originally needed. And it's interesting, part of it is also making sure, back to change management, making sure the plants take ownership of their processes. I think we found out different plants, if you had their leadership and their talent of their resources, some were really good and strong, and then others, they're very dependent. So it's kind of interesting how different plants need different levels of support. So it's easy to say right now how we would do that differently, but so we're definitely looking at that for our next 2 go lives. And then the thing that Pam also alluded to was, coming out of the pandemic, people getting back to where you're traveling an intense amount of time, working an intense amount of hours, including weekends and nights, go lives, which is, we have plants that are 24-hour support that we needed as part of the go live support. We're burning people out, and we did see, including consultants and business support and IT people, on all 3 of those buckets, like, no more, I can't take any more. And we're in an environment in which I think there's a breakout session coming up talking about how do you maintain and retain resources in this hyper competitive IT environment. So we got to make sure that we're treating our people right. We definitely didn't see, the burnout level coming, so we're trying to manage that and make sure that we're not pushing people too hard. And I think this another area is there's some people who just keep on going on the team, that they're getting burnt out even though they're not the ones telling you that you got to look for it, because some people are just. I've got a very dedicated team, and I'm very blessed to have that. But at the same time, they don't always look out for their own health, and so those have been some of the challenges.
Yep. So I'm pretty sure that's my last slide. Yep. So, in general, we just wanted to be able to share some insights, and then just kind of where we're at with the project, and some lessons learned that we would do differently next time. But what questions do you guys have? We have a microphone, Yelena.
Not really a question, but more like a comment. I had unique experience being on both sides, working internally at the customer, much like Entegris, and also working as a consultant before and now with Mindset. And our marketing department will be happy that I'm going to promote my blog post that I've written for Mindset website that talks about my experiences working on both sides. So if you're interested, please look it up. But I just wanted to back up everything that you have been saying about mixed teams, because when I was working on the client side, it's exactly all those things that you have mentioned that was most important ones. And I also been through the experience when we went working with a company, maybe very much like Mindset, that was US based, that we had trusting relationship with for years, and then suddenly we switched to different provider, and how deteriorating it was to everyone's experience. Unfortunately, it wasn't our decision, but for our team, and I think at the end, value for the company just wasn't really there based on the switch. So yeah, so thank you for highlighting all those aspects.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks. I think one other thing was, and we're not using just Mindset as consultants. We have, in Asia, we have a relationship with a consulting company called A-Beam that is doing a lot of the work there with their the local language and their presence there. And finding a provider that will work with other third parties and work as that one seamless team was also very critical. It was one of the requirements that we had right out of the gate.
Yep. Other questions?
Hi. I have been in a couple of implementations myself, and one thing that is always challenging is testing. When it comes to integration, you have different systems connected, like in your case, it's Oracle, and you're moving to ECC.
Can you speak up? Sorry, I can't.
Oh, sorry.
There we
There we
go.
go.
One of the challenging aspects I've always seen in implementations is testing, where you have multiple systems where you have to keep on testing your changes, change management. There are many moving parts. Like not all systems can have a similar landscape like SAP, Dev, QA, and production, but it's normally, if you take any of the integration scenarios, they don't have the same kind of setup that we normally have in SAP. And since you mentioned you have a rolling implementation where you just move your resource from one project to another, but when it comes to testing, how did you handle or manage to do those? Like if you had a complex integration scenario.
So let me make sure I understand the question. So it's around testing and how you manage testing through the different environments when you have rolling go lives. Is that kind of
Yes.
with the integrations?
Yes.
That's a good question. So I mean at Entegris, they have what I would consider a very simple landscape. So they have production, they have queue, and they have development, and then they have a sandbox. We do everything in queue. The developers code in D, and they can push to queue as often as they want. And we do everything in queue, and queue is pretty up to date from production. And so all of the Entegris projects are working in the same environment. So we're all testing on the same system that's going to be going to production. Is that kind of what you're asking, or?
Normally there are situations where you overstep, like you move your changes ahead even before some changes are already been tested. So a lot of communication, I believe, that needs to happen. Like you need to have a very solid, change management process. Like need to have a process and I'm coming from a background where I have found situations where testing has always been the key or the crux. Like you have 4 or 5 developers moving changes. Coming to the one central environment, and from there, testing is going on. You have a better control in SAP, I would say, but when it comes to, if you want to test an IDOC or any of the other process that is linked to any other process outside of your SAP environment, that's where things start to, communication needs to happen. That's what I feel.
Yeah, I think we've just been blessed, and I'm kind of looking at Mike. We have not had too many issues. I mean, with testing or with when we move something to queue, it messes something up. Yeah.
I would say where the bigger struggles are on the integration. So we talked about integrating back to those legacy CMC systems, the quality and manufacturing. They don't have all the 3-tier systems that we could test. So you're testing the output and assuming that output when you go live is going to work. And when we did go live, the first one, we did run into some problems into those systems, and at that point, we had to jump on. So that's where it gets back to that it's not going to be perfect go live, so you need to make sure that you have the right hypercare support there to jump on issues like that.
Other questions?
Related to requirement variation at the beginning of the project, how were those requirements brought in for pads, slurries, Asia, and how much of those new requirements got added into the Entegris blueprint based on their CNC has different processes and requirements?
Yeah,
right?
good question. So the approach that we took to kind of, and I'm using gathering requirements loosely because we did a current state process map we bumped it up against how Entegris plants currently use those same processes on SAP, and we identified where those gaps were. And then we documented and we prioritized each one of those gaps, and we went through kind of a challenging conversation to say, you know, is this needed? Is it critical? Do we have a standard in SAP where we just need to do some additional configuration, or is this truly a development piece that we have to spend time on? So we went through that exercise to kind of rank those gaps and make a decision on if we can go live with or without some of that stuff. There is some things, you know, probably not very much. I'd say maybe 10 or 15% that we've pushed off and said this will come later. But we've tried to accommodate the majority of it just because it was critical to their manufacturing processes if they didn't have it. Other questions?
Hi, it's a question more for Don, publicly traded CIO. How, you know, your business is to help your clients' yields, right? So how much oversight, or not oversight, interest did you have from your client base when this integration occurred? How worried were they? And what are your tips for other CIOs when they have to manage the expectations of both their fellow peers at the executive level as well as your clients?
Yeah, so we'll start off with the clients first. So I mean, within the semiconductor industry, we have very, very detailed, formal change management on when you're changing any of your process. They're PNCs and they're managed by the quality team. And we had a senior level of that quality team is on our ERP team to manage all those changes. So as they go through, we're clearly communicating to all of our key customers when any changes are coming through. So it's a very formal process. It is painful. So, you know, within that management, so then when you talk about managing the change within, you know, the management levels within the Heritage CMC, you know, it was taking and having FaceTime conversations with the head of their manufacturing and their operations, and as well as the owners of the pads and the slurries divisions to explain this is what we're going to do. And the Helen Frerichs is the overall lead of the ERP side from the Entegris IT team, and her presence is she's in the plants all the time, every week, even when we try to give her a break. And I really think that that's key, because when these leaders start hearing things that they don't like, they can run to Helen or Pam right away because they're there. But I do get emails from them. I got a couple of emails today, which I got to talk to you about. But so, you know, there is, you know, and I think that the fact that I've got a plant manager that hears some concerns and can send me an email right away means that those doors are wide open. And I think that's developing, getting back to relationships, and being very clear and transparent. I mean, I think one of the head of the slurries division, he's when we said the time frame, he goes, in order for this to work, he goes, you're not going to be able to do anything with our processes. You're just going to have to throw in your template. And I'm like, you get it. I don't even have to do anything. I go, you're absolutely right. Well, he goes, I didn't say I was comfortable with that. He just understood how it was going to have to happen. Hopefully that answered your question.
Peter took the question. How did you impact your customers? But it sounds like you got that covered. When aggressive timeline, getting the people, getting the culture, getting the plan right, getting the buy-in, that's critical to success. And you talked a little bit about some of the technical challenges, but you look at that timeline and you could spend, you know, half of it talking about data, right, if you had a normal implementation. So what were some of the things that you had to either, hopefully not short circuit, but improve upon or accelerate, like data integrations or master data management, those types of things as you went through this?
So I'll start off with, there's an individual who knows the number one problem with any ERP integration project. It's data. Yeah. In fact, anything that has to do with any IT systems, it always goes back to the data. So I mean, we did have some problems with that. I'll let Pam talk about it, but we actually had to switch out and put a new lead within the master data management team, and we've had to throw some resources at it. And it has not come without pain. Data always seems to be the #1 pain issue. But I think by having it as its own work stream with a dedicated leader really helps.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of the things that we have going for us, they're coming from Oracle. So when you look at the 3 biggest critical pieces of master data for manufacturing, they did have that in Oracle. Now, it wasn't to the standard and the quality that SAP needs to run, so we've spent a lot of time enriching the data. But honestly, we also have an advantage of it's not a lot of data. So we're able to use tools like WinShuttle and SQL to kind of manage some of that movement. We have data validation checks by the plant throughout various points. So as we either load data or get ready to load data, we have them look at it in an Excel sheet. Then we load the data, we have them look at it in SAP. We have them test their processes against it. So those are some of the things that we've done to try and minimize issues with data for the project. Integrations. Some of the advantages that we have going for us, we have a very awesome technical team, both on Entegris and Mindset side, that basically we're able to look at the integrations from Oracle to third parties, break them down and say, we're just gonna repeat it from SAP or to SAP and the third party. So they were able to take those mappings and translate Oracle fields into SAP without a whole lot of functional integration or functional knowledge. So we started the developers on those right away. One of their first kickoffs back in August was an integration week where they looked at all the third-party integrations that were in scope and went through that mapping. We actually put that on to the developers while we did the rest of kind of the fit gap. So they did the more technical stuff up front, not without challenges, definitely, but yeah. Any other questions? I think we're probably about 2 minutes over. All right, awesome.
All right, thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
guys for attending.